presentation. It's all right. So
Good job.
the whole purpose of that. So today we're talking about seller compensation. Seller concessions actually is the, what I think it's called. Oops. I'm oopsing already. And I'm having some computer difficulties, so some of this is a PowerPoint, some of this is not a PowerPoint. If we have time, I'm going to go and do some other fun things on what's going on in the market. But I want to talk about seller concessions. Now, if you were here last week, I was going through, there's a buyer representation presentation, which I'm still tweaking, and parts of a seller compensation, which I'm also tweaking a little bit. And some of this is going to be incorporated. And so my goal is in a week or so to have both the buyer representation as well as the seller listing presentation with a compensation module all finished. My plan for the seller compensation module is to not only produce something in a PowerPoint that you could use and modify if you're on my team, but also I'm going to make a video explaining it. That would be something that you could share with sellers. What worries me is that there are a lot of sellers who don't know what's going on, and there are a lot of real estate agents who don't know what's going on, and there's a lot of real estate brokers that don't know what's going on. And so I'm already hearing stories where the seller says, hey, I know I don't have to pay commissions anymore. I don't want to pay commissions anymore. I ain't going to pay commissions anymore. It's going to be illegal in August anyhow. So why don't we just stop now? Right. And of course, there's lots about that are not true. And so if you're a listing agent, it's going to be more important for you to understand what seller concessions are and why they're being used, and how it's what's in it for the seller, and how to explain it to a seller. Now, the CRMLS, which in California is the largest MLS, I'm muting everybody. If you want to speak, you're going to have to unmute yourself. The CRMLS is the largest MLS in California, and Bright MLS, which is another big MLS, but I don't think in California, CRMLS has already put a new seller concession spot, I don't know, part of the multiple listing service. So when you're inputting a listing in CRMLS, you already have a choice now to say that seller is willing to give a concession to a buyer, which would be like saying I'm willing to pay a commission. According to CRMLS, which is primarily in Southern California, but there's a few pockets they have in Northern California, in 2023, 40% of the listings that were in CRMLS that went through CRMLS involved the seller paying a concession. Because apparently when you close a transaction, they ask you, was there any concessions? So what those concessions have been primarily are either buy downs on the interest rate, or some concession that is being made because of repairs or some kind of work that needs to be done. Right up until now, the two most common concessions are, I'm going to offer some points. Points is a jargon for a percentage of a loan. I'm going to offer some points to buy down the interest rate, or I know the property has got termites, but I don't want to fix them. I'll give you a credit and you can do it yourself. So now that's going to, well, it may become more important. So what are seller concessions? You may already intuitively know what we're talking about, but they're contributions that the seller makes to buyers to offset closing costs. It could be for closing costs, it could be repairs, it could be financial incentives, and it also can be for a cooperating buyer agent compensation. There's already a spot in the California Association of Realtors residential purchase agreement which I'm sure you've all memorized all of this. It's paragraph 3G3. Right, you remember this. And paragraph 3G in the residential purchase agreement, I have a screenshot coming. Paragraph 3G in the residential purchase agreement is about seller credits. And paragraph 3G3 is specifically about a seller concession or credit, they're the same thing, that would be used to pay or compensate a buyer's agent. So in this will be, there was a lawsuit. Have you heard that? And a settlement. And so the lawsuit and the settlement decouples, detaches the offer of compensation from the multiple listing service. But it doesn't say, at least as of now, that the seller can't give a concession. Now, they're not going to let you in the multiple listing service say, I as the seller, am willing to give 2.5%, 2.25% to the buyer to be used as compensation for their agent. You can't do that. But you can say, I'm willing to give 2.5%, 2.25% concession to the buyer. You can put that in the multiple listing service. And what you're going to find is that some agents are going to be putting in, code in the private comments, like, and we don't know how far you can go with this, but you could say something like broker friendly, and we're broker friendly. Yeah. By the way, if you read real estate news, which, I do because you might not want to, there's actually a website that's purporting to say, if you're a listing agent, you can put your listings in this website and say how much of a commission you're willing to pay to a buyer's agent. Right? So, but some people are freaking out that people are trying to get around this. So in the MLS, you can't say, I'm going to pay the buyer's agent commission or compensation for the buyer's agent, but that doesn't mean you can't put it in a purchase agreement. It doesn't mean it can't be in a listing agreement. So when I'm on a listing appointment and I'm talking to a seller about how do we get the most money when we sell your property, and I point out to them that 29% of all the properties that the buyers buy, their agent found, and 90% of the time the buyer has an agent, and if we want to get you the best price possible, we need to get you the most exposure possible, and to do that means working with other agents. Right? I can do that, and I can have the conversation when I'm listing the property. Are you willing to compensate a cooperating agent who brings a buyer with an offer that you like? Are you willing to do that? And if they say, yeah, I'm willing to do that, I want to make sure I'm recording this. Am I recording? Yes. And the seller says, yeah, I'm willing to do it. We could talk about how much. Now, one of the things that I would point out to a seller is the question of who really is paying the buyer's agent compensation. Where does the money actually come from? And the seller doesn't put any money into escrow unless they're upside down on the loan, which is very unusual. So all of the money that goes into escrow comes from the buyer. And there are reasons why the buyer would rather roll in the compensation to their agent as part of the offer. So if a seller said to me, I don't want to pay, I know I don't have to pay, I ain't going to pay a buyer's agent commission. And if you were in my session last week, if I were on a listing, and if you're on a listing, it might be better to frame this, not by asking them, do you want to pay the buyer's agent's commission, right? I wouldn't use those words. Are you willing to pay a cooperating broker compensation if they brought you a buyer that made an offer that you liked? And if somebody said, I don't want to pay any commission to another agent, I would say, well, is it okay with you if the buyer pays their agent a commission? Is that okay with you? I mean, if the buyer did, I mean, you're not against the buyer agent ever getting anything, are you? You just don't want to pay it. And every seller that I've known has said, well, sure, if the buyer's going to pay it, yeah, the buyer can pay it. That's my whole point. So what I used to do this, there used to be a time when this was a lot more common. And I was listing properties that were not in the multiple listing service. They were all off market. This was before clear cooperation. There was only an agreement to pay me a commission. There was no agreement to pay anyone else a commission. But I would say to the seller, is it okay for the buyer to pay their agent? I mean, they'd say, yes, of course. So when an agent would contact me and say, well, it's not on the MLS, that's right. Can I show it? Yeah, there's a lockbox. What about my commission? Can I, get paid? Am I going to get paid? And I would say, well, the owner has not committed to paying a commission, but just build it into the price. Just add it into the price. Right? And then it's, oh, well, all right. And so they would write an offer and then ask for a commission. When I'd show it to the seller said, I ain't paying a commission. I said, you're not paying a commission. That's not what's going on here. The buyer raised the amount that they're offering in order for you to have money to compensate their agent. At which point, which is something we're going to talk about now, soon, the seller would say, well, I don't understand. Why don't they just pay their agent directly? We're going to talk about that. So you're going to have to become better at explaining this. You're going to have to be able to explain to sellers what's in it for them for doing this and how it works. And if you're on my team and you want, give me a Zoom call, give me a phone call, because I have some experience explaining this. Now, there are two issues involved. One issue is when we're talking about concessions, and there's concession limits set by different lenders depending upon the kind of loan. Now, the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have said that, at least for now, on their loans, that they're not going to, if there was a 2.25%, 2.5% concession made to pay the buyer's cooperating agent, that they're not going to include that in these numbers. But we don't know for sure. And by the way, the Chicago Title Agent 1, or it's called Palm Agent, actually has a way where you can put in a number and it would show you what these are. But this is the limit currently for the different kinds of loans. I think I have a chart, right? Isn't that a nice looking chart? Artificial intelligence made that chart for me. God bless artificial intelligence. I just thought I would throw it in. However, in addition to that, you'll see I've got another one coming up. If it's normal, if it's reasonable, the lenders for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac at least are saying that you can pay the buyer's cooperating agent compensation as a concession, and it won't be included in those maximums. So MLS, CRMLS already has concession fields. I mentioned that. And Bright MLS has concession fields, and they're actually doing support and all that other kind of stuff. What's in it for a seller? Well, it's going to be, the goal is that we want to get you the most money possible. And in the framing of the conversation, I actually would ask a seller, what is your goal? Is your goal to not pay a cooperating agent compensation? Or is it your goal to net the most money when you sell your house? Well, what's the goal here? And we want to refocus them on the goal is to net the most money. Now, what I talked about last week as an example, I'm not going to go through that again because I put last week's on my YouTube channel already. But what I would be talking to sellers about are new home subdividers. I would ask a seller, how many times have you sold a house? The answer may be, this will be my first one, or once before, right? I mean, usually people aren't selling a lot of houses. Some flippers do, but most don't. So the seller has limited experience at selling real estate, selling houses to net the most money. But new home subdividers, they have a lot of experience. This is what they do, right? They sell hundreds of thousands every month. And they're focused on the bottom line. Their focus is on netting the most money possible. And what they do is they communicate with real estate agents. They offer marketing materials to real estate agents. They offer compensation to real estate agents for registering and bringing buyers. And you need to keep in mind that the compensation they're paying to real estate agents, the agent is not acting as an agent in that transaction. The agent is simply getting a referral fee, but they still pay sometimes 2 to 3%. Why do new home subdividers pay real estate agents that cooperate with them compensation? Why do they do that? Do they do it because they're generous people, that this is a form of charity? They just like real estate agents and want to make sure they're not poor? Probably none of those. It's because they know, because they've studied it, that they net the most money by cooperating with other agents. They know that. And that's why they do it. And when you take into consideration that 90% of all buyers have agents, and 29% of the time the agent actually connects the buyer to the property they buy, do we really want to lose 29% of the buyers? Do we really want to do that? Because the more buyers we get, the more people that want it, the more offers we get, the more people want it, the more people want it. And if we can attract more buyers, you're going to net more money. We might sell it anyhow, but the number of people that we're going to have as potential buyers is going to go down. Benefits to buyers, upfront cash, I'm going to talk about that. More for other things, more affordable. You probably already knew that one. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac says the seller payment of a buyer agent commissions is excluded from their concession limits, which means that they could still, you understand, if it's not a commission in the multiple listing service, but a concession in the multiple listing service, I mean, really, I don't know, right? I don't know. But we'll see how, some of this is still going back and forth. Now, in terms of, and just let me also say this. Today, last year, it was years, for decades, it's been possible for a seller to list their home and tell the listing agent, I don't want to pay anything. There was a time when you had to say something, but it could have been $1. It's been possible for sellers to say, I'm paying a buyer's agent compensation of $1 or nothing. That's been possible, but very few have done that because it reduces the competitiveness of their listing. So there's still things we don't know. The VA, it's not legal for the buyer to pay their agent compensation, not legal. And so they don't really know what they're going to do. These are workarounds. All right. So, and a GSE, isn't that a type of, it's a vitamin supplement? No, that's not right. A government sponsored enterprise is like Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. There's still stuff going on, right? Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have put out a letter, but is that a commitment? No matter what, we don't know. So who really pays the cooperating agent? All the money comes from the buyer. In that sense, the money that is used to pay the listing agent's commission, the buyer's agent's compensation, the seller's closing costs, the buyer's closing costs are all paid out of the money the buyer and the buyer's lender puts into escrow. For all the money comes from. Now, some of the things that I've added, a couple of these were last week as well, but I've added some goodies that are coming up. We'll see how good. I would explain to a seller that buyers have closing costs. There's loan origination fees, appraisal fees, title insurance, recording fees, escrow fees, there's notary fees, there's mobile notary fees, there's, there are a lot of fees. Yeah, and that depending upon the kind of loan and the county it's in and a bunch of other factors, it could be between 2 and 5%, not including compensation to their agent. Now, I would also explain, I'm going to get to my colorful charts. I would also explain to the seller what's been happening in California over time. And this colorful mountain range shows what's happened to the median home price in California since, what was it, 2012 or actually 2005. It goes up and down, up and down. I may move this one out because I had AI make me this one. And in the last 10 years, this is what the California home price appreciation chart looks like. That's what it looks like. With an average annual growth of over 6.5% a year. By the way, in some counties, it's more than 10. Some counties, not as much. Average is 6.52. And let me see. You'd have. I'll get to the questions a little bit later. It's squirrel, throws me off. So I would be pointing out to the seller that you have to understand the situation buyers are in. Number one, prices are going up a lot. And I would know when I'm on the listing appointment how much that seller paid for their house and how much it's appreciated and how much profit, capital gains, they're going to be likely to making from the sale of the house. Also, what's happened to interest rates? Well, if we go back 12 years in 2022, it was in the 3s and then in the 4s and went up and went down. So right now I would know when I'm on the listing appointment, roughly what today's interest rates are. And I know, Jody, that, that varies depending upon a bunch of different factors, but get an idea, all right, of what today's interest rates are. And if you know when the owner bought their property, AI is very good at this. If you type into ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, Claude, Perplexity, and you simply say, what was the home mortgage interest rate in 2021, right? It'll just pop out with a rough number. So when you're talking to the seller, you could say, look at when you bought your house, interest rates were, 3.5 to 4, right? Now they're 7 to 7.5. So prices are going up, interest rates are going up, and home affordability, the home affordability index has gone down. Back when you bought your house back in 2012, and by the way, the different AI programs can answer this question. What was the home affordability index in 2012 in California versus today? It'll spit it out. But back in 2012, when you bought your house, the home affordability index in California was over 50%. It's 17% now. So the world has changed since the time you bought your house. Prices have gone up dramatically. Good news for you. Interest rates have gone up dramatically, and affordability has gone down. All right. And then all of this, by the way, came from a California Association of Realtors, fairly recent, April 2024. And this breaks the home affordability down into different areas. the United States versus California, single family home versus California condos and townhomes, LA, Inland, and San Francisco. It didn't have that. This is all they had, right? This is all they got. So I would be making it very clear that the buyers are going to have challenges. Now, the question is, first of all, buyers, we want buyers if we represent the seller. The seller wants buyers. Buyers want representation. Over 90% of buyers have an agent. 29% of the time, the agent finds them the house they bought. We don't want to cut out 90% of the buyers. Now, the question is the compensation that we're going to be paying for the cooperating broker in or out of escrow? Now, what sellers that say zero in the MLS, what they're saying is they want it out of escrow. They don't want to see a deduction in escrow for a compensation to a cooperating agent. But if you, and I've been having computer problems today where I would have done a search and taken some snippets from headlines. But if you were going to look for, a lot of it is misinformation, but it's all over the internet. What are the effects of the NAR settlement? Why did they bring the lawsuit? What do they expect is going to happen as a result of the lawsuit? They being the plaintiffs who filed the class action suit. And one of the things you're going to see over and over again is that the expectation of the lawsuit is that prices will drop. Why do they expect prices to drop? Because the compensation that would be paid to the buyer's cooperating agent would be taken out of escrow. It would be something the buyer does on the side, and that will bring down home prices. That, by the way, is one of the premises of the lawsuit. So if you're a seller and you sell it for $800,000, but you offer a $20,000 concession to compensate the cooperating buyer's agent, you net $780. If you say, I ain't gonna do it, right, not paying anything, okay, now the buyer has to make that payment outside of escrow. Do buyers have a lot of extra money sitting around that they can use to do this? The answer is no. Look at the 17% housing affordability index. Look at the interest rates. Look at all the things that have gone up since then. So what would the buyer do? Well, the buyer, they might even lower it more, but they're not able to offer as much as they would if it was built into the price. They can't, because they need, a lot of them, you know, they need the money for closing costs. They you know, they're trying to get a 90% loan, a 95% loan. They're getting in on a shoehorn, right? You know, being wedged into the house, right? And so they don't have any money. So if those buyers don't have the funds to pay their own agent, and you won't allow them to put it into the price, they're going to have to buy a different house. They're going to have to buy a different house. Now, this is related to the concessions as well. Why would the buyer want to roll it into the price? And the answer is, if it is rolled into the price, it can be financed. So if the buyer is paying $20,000 to their agent, their cooperating agent, to represent them, and it's an 80% loan, and it appraises, and it's an 80% loan, how much of the buyer's money do they have to, out of pocket extra money, do they have to put forward? And the answer is $4,000. Why? Because 80% of it is financed. If it's a 90% loan, it's $2,000, because 90% of it is financed, right? That's why buyers want to put it in the price. Because then they can finance it. This is assuming the property appraises. But to say to the buyers, no, we don't want you to put it in the price because I've got principals and I don't want to pay another agent's commission, right? To say that means they can't afford to they can't afford to pay you as much. And if you diminish this is simple economics. If you lower the purchasing power of buyers for your product, what does that do to the price of your product? What does that do? If you diminish the purchasing power. Now, I've had to explain this a lot of times. I didn't have a chance to, bold this and bold that and put color in and all the other kind of fun stuff. But, so sellers sometimes don't now, by the way, even if the seller says, I ain't gonna pay a buyer's agent a commission. I ain't gonna do it, I don't care what you say, right? I ain't gonna do it. That doesn't mean that a buyer couldn't write it up in an offer. And just say, I want you to pay me 2.5% credit towards closing costs. They just say that. Now, what sellers, I've heard this many times say, I just don't understand why they're doing it. They're playing some sort of a game. I don't like the game. If it's $10,000 that they want, why don't they just offer $10,000 less? I don't get it, right? They're offering $10,000. They want me to give them $10,000 credit. Why don't they just offer $10,000? I don't get it. So we're back to the loan thing again. If they have an 80% loan and you lower your price $10,000, out of pocket, that saves the buyer $2,000. Because of the $10,000, 80% was coming from the lender in the first place. 2% was $2,000 was their down payment. If they have a 90% loan and you lower it by $10,000, it saves the buyer out of pocket expenses $1,000. That's it. But if you give the buyer a $10,000 concession, they get $10,000 that they can use to defray out-of-pocket expenses. And to the seller, it doesn't change their net. Either way they do it. You net the same. Right? But this is why they want to roll it into the price. This is why. Paragraph 3G. And the RPA is being tweaked also. I don't know if they're planning on changing this, but just for those of you, I know you guys are on this and you study the purchase agreement. You have a copy you keep next to your bed and you read it at night, just to memorize it, that sort of thing. But this is paragraph 3G. We snipped it out of a transaction. And first of all, there's a place if you're representing the buyer to just write in a credit. But 3G3 says, and this is going to be probably modified, the seller agrees to pay the obligation of buyer to compensate a buyer's broker under a separate agreement. Form SPBB, which I know you also keep copies of and read them, when you have insomnia. Seller's broker offer, if any, to compensate buyer's broker is unaffected unless otherwise agreed. All right, so what is the SPBB? It's a seller payment to buyer broker form. And if you've already noticed, it says in big, bold, if you, and I also like this, notice the date is 6/23, right? So I went to the future. Actually, no, it's 6/23. I'm sorry, this is being modified too. All of these are going to change slightly. For some reason I was seeing 6/24, and I thought I was, having, future issues again. So this was done last year. It's going to be tweaked a little bit. It's on the list that we're going to go over in the next couple of weeks. But look at what it says in boldface. The buyer and buyer's agent have already entered into a buyer representation agreement. Buyer has an obligation to pay buyer's broker compensation pursuant to the representation agreement. Buyer is asking seller to pay buyer's broker all or a portion of the balance due buyer's broker under the representation agreement. Now, this is going to be changed, right? This is the current form, and what's going to be changed is that the way this is worded now, the buyer is paying, this would be useful if you got the buyer to sign and you get 2.5%. And right now the MLS says you only get 2. What about the other half? So this form was designed to bridge that gap. But it's being redesigned so that you could simply, I probably didn't even need to show it to you. It's going to, this part is going to change where it's not necessarily tied to, I'm going to make up the difference between what the buyer is paying you and what you got the buyer to say. Like, that's the current form, but the new version is going to allow you to simply say the seller agrees to pay X amount for the cooperating agent compensation. Why is that important? Because Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac are saying that that concession is different from the concession in 3G1. Right, the concession in 3G1 has got those limits. 3G3, when it's rewritten, would be another place where the seller could say, yeah, I'm willing to pay X amount as compensation. It's a concession to be used to compensate the buyer's agent. Any questions about this? Don't everybody blurt them out at once. All right, let's see what the chat says.
So you'll be able to be there to explain it to our buyers, all this, right?
Yes, I have a calendar link, which some of you know. And buyers and sellers, give me an appointment.
Thank you.
I'd be happy to talk to them. Sellers in particular, I was doing this, there was a time when we were doing off-market listings all the time. I mean, I did more than a dozen sales of properties that weren't on the MLS, and there was no agreement to pay a commission. And Jody has put in, good for you, Jody, and an event. If I'm understanding this correctly, under new rules, realtors repping buyers are expected to do so for free, and these are workarounds. So not really. What the new rule is that buyers, and when I'm putting together like a thing for the team. Let me just find it. So what did I call it? I don't want to update now. New forms ending our summary. Here we go. So this is what I spent today doing. Listening to lawyers talk about this is the new form, which is 624. This is one of the new releases. This is what the new buyer representation and broker compensation agreement is. So notice it's got the grid look like, you know, the RPA. Amount of compensation, right? So the NAR settlement says that you have to have a buyer representation agreement. The good news is, so does everyone else. The buyer representation agreement has to specify your compensation, and you can't get more than what it says. However, you can have more than one buyer representation agreement, depending upon, you can have one for different properties, and you can amend it, right? When I do the class on these, I'm going to go through all the different forms. It could be a percent. You could put in 2, 2.5, 2.25, 3, or 5, whatever you can convince a buyer to pay. you're gonna have to have, and that's why I've been working on the buyer representation presentation, because you're gonna need to be able to articulate why they want to work with you. Again, if you create like a Zoom call or something and you've got me on the line to explain how we're going to help with the transaction, because I have a better answer for how long have you been in real estate and how many real estate transactions have you had. I have a better answer. And you have Jody and all of that, it's going to make it look a lot more impressive. Right now, you can, so you would put in and the amount that would make you happy. Right now, this is like an ongoing relationship. As I said, it's going to be possible for us to have an agreement for a property. I'm going to show you this property and I'm going to get this. I'm going to show you that property and I'm going to get that. Right, but then you might want to say the least I'm going to work for is 2%, 2.25%, 2.5%. But you need to be able to say what I'm going to do. Then it says in payments to third parties that this means the seller or the listing agent. Listing agents still will be listing the property for 5% and sharing 2.5%. I'll show you where that is. They can still do that. They just can't say it in the multiple listing service. Now there's this form. We're going to go through all these different forms soon. I'm waiting to make sure, I'm still going through the training they're having for them, but I'm waiting to make sure they don't revise them anymore. They say they're not. But if we go here, let me see, continued right there, broker cancellation possible, broker authorizations, good faith, dispute. So where did I want to do this? There are 3 ways for you to be paid. It's here someplace. I'm not going to go through all the details of this one because I'm going to be doing a class. This is the broker compensation advisory, which says it fairly plainly. Here are the 3 ways on which a broker can obtain compensation. 1, or A, the buyer can pay it through the buyer representation agreement. B, the seller can pay it. Or C, the seller's agent can pay it. So you're not going to be saying, I'm working for free. Don't say that. Right? Don't say that. You're going to have a meeting with the buyer and we're going to explain what we're going to do. And then the buyer is going to agree to work with us for a certain period of time. And it could be an exclusive arrangement, it could be a non-exclusive arrangement, it could be property-specific arrangements. Let me see. We're not gonna. You'd have the buyer sign a buyer's representation agreement and include the amount of percent in that buyer's agreement. Correct. Is there a bullet point for these conversations? I don't know what that means. Monica thinks it's helpful. I like that. Elvira came in late. Is there a handout? Somebody. Thank you, Aisha. I appreciate that. It just shows how agents have to be able to explain their value proposition. Yeah. Earn their client's trust. Yeah. Cooperating broker commission can be advertised on all marketing materials, but not on the MLS. It can't be advertised. It can't be in the MLS, and it can't be on a website that is using IDX. That's the Internet Data Exchange to display all the listings. But somebody could have, you could have a single property website, which you've created for your listing that you want to share with other agents, and it could be there. It can be on flyers that you hand out at the board meetings. It could be on flyers you put in the brochure box. It could be on a voicemail when somebody calls you. You could say, hey, if you're calling about my property on Starwood Drive, just want you to know that the seller has agreed to compensate a cooperating agent to 2.25%, 2.5%. You can do all that. You just can't put it in the MLS, and you can't put it on a website, which includes an MLS feed. Now, brokers could have a website that has all of their listings, and they could say it, but they don't have all the listings on the website. You could put it on your own website as long as you're not displaying all the listings through the MLS. The broker could do the same. You just can't put it in the MLS. And as I said, there's a website that's already said, we'll do it for you. Right. We'll see
Michael?
how long that lasts. Yes.
I'd like you to clarify, because I think I've also been attending the classes that you've been going to, or the seminars. Anybody that they receive IDX or they send IDX, it's really important on this. Someone was talking about this the other day. If you have a website, your website most likely through your broker is receiving IDX. And if that's the case, do not put a listing price on your own website. I don't mean to jump in. I just wanted you to know this was something that legal brought up the other day. And they said to be very careful on this. It's IDX going either way.
Right. Well, IDX only goes one way. But and I thought I said it can't be on the website with IDX. Right. I thought I said.
Thank you. Thank you.
So if you're wondering, what does that mean? If I go to my personal EXP website, right? Now, the personal EXP website, which looks like this, is a traditional IDX website. You see, there's all these listings. Yeah, right. There are all these listings. However, within our software, I could go to marketing, and I'm going to be talking more about getting use out of the core listing machine, but there's something called Design Center. And in the Design Center, I have the ability to create a website. And that website would be connected to my listing, and which I don't really have one here, but I could, website. Let me just see. I have to, branding my company here. How about this, right? Just for fun. So what our magic software is doing, I didn't even look to see what it was, but it's not a single family home, right? Because I just, was picking out something. But what this is going to do is it's going to create a website for that property, single property website. They won't be able to search for other properties. It won't have IDX on it necessarily. So EXP has a couple of ways of doing that, where you can create a single property website that all that it displays is that property. Right? So now you're not talking about IDX. The other thing that is easy to do is to just create a Google site about your listing, and then you can put stuff on it. You just don't have the IDX feed. But you can create a website that you can use that has your listing, just doesn't have any of the other stuff. All right. But we're gonna have to be able to articulate what our value proposition is to a buyer and explain to a seller why it would be, they're going to net more money if they get the real estate agents. See, I know from experience that most buyer agents are getting paid more than the listing agent. I know that. I know that a lot of times sellers, if the property isn't selling, say, why don't we offer the buyer's agent a bonus in order to get something going? Why don't we do that? That sellers, many of them want to know that you're going to put it on the board tour and you're going to market it to other agents and that you're talking to other agents. They want you to do this, right? I know that, right? I know that 75% of for sale by owners pay a buyer's agent a commission. I know that commercial real estate, I've seen a lot of commercial closing statements, and most commercial brokerages are not members of the MLS. They're not members of the Board of Realtors. They're not putting in anywhere, I'm obligated to pay a 2.5%, 2% commission to a buyer's. There's no obligation to do that, but most closing statements in commercial real estate look like residential ones, in that the seller is paying a cooperating broker compensation. Part of our proposal, which is what we call a listing presentation in the commercial world, part of our proposal is to promise the seller that we're going to cooperate with other agents. You see, part of the problem is going to be if the seller says, no, I ain't going to pay. I don't care if that rolling it into the price, I'm going to buy that. There'll be no credits, nothing. Well, what then if the buyers can't afford an agent? Well, then you do it. You're the listing agent. You have to. So if you're the listing agent, that means the buyer doesn't have access to the lockbox. They may be able to come to the open house, but if they want to see it during the week, you got to show it for them. If the buyers want to talk to somebody about all the disclosures and they don't have an agent, who's going to do that? You, the listing agent? What happens if you have a hot property and there's 10 buyers who want to make an offer? Are you going to write 10 offers explaining everything 10 times? You see, when the seller expects the listing agent to not only do the listing agent's job, but the job of all or most of the buyer's agents. If I were the listing agent, I'd want to be paid more. Right, because I'm not going to list your home and get 2%, let's say, on the listing side, and then be expected not only to do everything that we would have done anyhow, but then to do everything for the buyers as well. I'm going to want more. How much more? Well, more than what we would have paid a buyer's agent. Because you're asking me to do it not just with one buyer, but every buyer or most of the buyers. So how much is the seller saving? If the listing agent commission goes up because they're pushing all of this on the listing agent, and then buyers' purchasing power goes down, the number of buyers that are going to look at the property goes down, how is this helping the seller? How are they netting any more money? What we're going to be doing in the conversation, and if I were talking to a buyer and they were complaining, I would stop them and say, what's your goal? Is it your goal to not pay a commission to a buyer's agent, or is it your goal to net the most money? And if they say, well, it's to net the most money, well, let's talk about how we do that. And the way we do that is we expose your property to the greatest number of potentially qualified buyers. And part of that means we're going to be marketing it to the general public, but we also need to market it to other real estate agents. And the best way to get other real estate agents interested in your property and showing your property and trying to sell your property is that if we compensate them, if they cooperate and bring an offer. If you don't like the offer, you don't have to accept it. But why start off by saying, we don't even want you to make me an offer like that? Really? If the buyer offered more money, but then asked for a credit, you're going to say, no, you'll take less money from somebody else if they don't offer a credit. I mean, are we that pig-headed, right? We're that stuck in that principle that we're willing to throw money to the side in order to stand on that principle. You know, I'm ready. Give me an appointment. I want to talk to some of them. All right, I got another appointment. But
Thanks, Mike.
we'll keep talking about this.
Thank you so
It's
much.
not over. Bye, everybody.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Michael.
Bye-bye.
We'll send you the top clients to you.
Bye, Mike.
There's actually a webinar coming up on how to deal with difficult clients and agents. Ra, texted me that, and I told her I don't have any difficult agents. Bye, everybody.
Thank you,
Bye.
Michael. Have a good day, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Mike.